My name is Daniel Cole, but everyone just calls me Danny. I've got one of those faces that blends into a crowd and a voice like a warm blanket over static. That's probably why I ended up doing what I do. Shaping sound, cleaning noise, listening for the parts people miss. There's something intimate about it, like holding your ear to the wall of the world and catching secrets no one meant to tell. Now, I wasn't planning to dig into anyone's secrets when my dad died. I was just trying to hold it together at the funeral, wearing a tie that still smelled like the drawer it had slept in for 6 years. But then I heard them, my cousins Nathan and Claire, huddled behind the big hydrangea arrangement near the catering table. Their voices were low, but I have an ear for whispers. He'll never know. It's not like he was supposed to get anything anyway. That was Claire. She has the kind of voice that sounds like it's always on speakerphone, even when you're right next to her. That was the first crack in the paint. I didn't react, didn't turn my head. Just watched the priest rearrange his papers at the podium and felt a cold humming pressure build between my ribs. A reality check says, if I go, you'll be cooled for skipping this part. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the Final Revenge channel. But only if you really like what I have to say here. Now get in the mood to listen to this story, because it could be the ultimate sweet revenge. After the service, I helped load the leftover food into the church basement fridge. People kept telling me how strong I was being. I smiled, nodded, and said, "Thank you," like a polite little download bar of grief. My Aunt Linda pulled me into one of those aggressive hugs where they squeeze your shoulder like they're auditioning for a Peppermill commercial. She smelled like vanilla lotion and a very expensive lie. "Your dad was so proud of you, sweetie. He'd always talk about your little music things. It's called audio engineering, but sure, my little music things." She let me go and air-kissed the space near my cheek. I know it's hard, but the will was all sorted already. He wanted it that way. I blinked. "What?" "Oh, nothing, sweetheart. Just everything's being handled." She smiled, the kind of smile that's more about her teeth than anything behind them. I didn't know it then, but that was the first breadcrumb, and I was about to follow it into a forest I didn't know I'd been living beside my whole life. 2 days later, a delivery showed up at my apartment. Manila envelope. No return address. The name was clearly labeled, Nathan Cole, my cousin. But it came to me. I didn't open it right away. I sat with it on my studio desk for hours, staring at the flap like it might blink first. Eventually, curiosity slapped my morals off the table, and I peeled it open. Inside was a rough draft of a will. My dad's name, my aunt's name, Claire's name, Nathan's name, Linda's husband, Linda's dog's goddamn veterinarian. My name was nowhere on it. The weird part? The date. It was from 3 months ago. But I'd seen Dad 2 weeks before he died. We'd talked about what he was planning. He said clear as the hi-hat on a raw track, "You'll get the house, kid. It's not much, but it's yours." So unless he decided I'd suddenly become a garbage fire of a human, someone had made edits. I started listening. I've got a tiny lavalier mic I sometimes clip under my shirt collar for test levels. I wore it to the casual family gathering. Linda threw the next weekend. Bunch of shrimp cocktail and backhanded sympathy. Claire said something about securing things for legal purposes, and Nathan nodded like he'd just been knighted by Wall Street. No one noticed the red light tucked inside my jacket lining. They thought I was the quiet one, the background noise, the guy who once made a beat from a microwave beep and a baby crying. And that's fine. That's exactly what I needed them to think. Because if I was going to prove what they'd done, if I was going to get justice for Dad, I had to be silent long enough for them to fill the silence themselves. And oh boy, did they ever. But I'll get to that. Just know this. If you ever think no one's watching, remember me. The guy holding the boom mic at your family drama, nodding politely while collecting the soundtrack to your downfall. The envelope wouldn't stop staring at me. Even after I'd opened it and read the whole thing twice, I left it on my desk like a corpse I didn't know how to bury. It just sat there, accusatory, beige, and stiff, daring me to ignore it. I didn't. That night, I poured a glass of Dad's old bourbon, and which I'd rescued from his liquor cabinet, before Linda's husband accidentally boxed it all up and let the fire slide down my throat. The legal draft was full of weird phrasing. It felt off. like someone had tried to mimic how lawyers talk based on crime shows. Phrases like, per the aforementioned verbal instruction and in the absence of alternate directive. What lawyer writes like they're copy-pasting from a thesaurus? I compared it to an old copy of Dad's will he'd emailed me last year in formal sure, but written in plain English. My name was there. The house. His collection of vintage microphones. Even the dusty little sailboat we never fixed. All gone now from this version. I ran my fingers across the paper. Cheap stock, laser printed. Maybe from an office. Maybe from someone's home. I was just about to shove the draft back in its envelope when a small triangle of folded paper slipped out. I almost missed it. It was handwritten. Just keep your mouth shut. He won't contest it. No name. No date. Just the hissing pressure of guilt pressed into ink. That was it for me. The game was on. Oh. The next morning I started digging. Not like private investigator trenchcoat digging. I just started listening harder. Old voicemails from Dad. Drafts of emails. Notes from our last phone calls. In one, he said Linda's been asking a lot of questions lately. Says it's about my future care. Funny coming from someone who thinks Tylenol is a government plot. He'd chuckled. I hadn't really thought much of it at the time. But now, I was replaying every offhand comment like it was a hidden track on a concept albums. Everything felt loaded. Everything felt coded. I knew one thing. If Dad had made changes, real legal ones, he'd have told me. Unless someone got to them first. Oh. So I decided to test the waters. I called Aunt Linda. Hey, I said, keeping my tone breezy. Just wondering, did Dad ever mention anything about a backup copy of his will? Something online. She paused. Not a long pause, but enough to show she wasn't expecting that question. Oh, honey, I'm not sure. He was always so old-fashioned about that sort of thing. Lie number one. Dad had Dropbox Google Drive and 2 encrypted backup servers for his studio work. Old-fashioned my ass. Right, I said. Just thought I'd ask. Well, she added quickly, the important thing is we honor his memory, not argue over paperwork. I smiled so hard my molars ground together. Oh, totally. Just curious. I hung up and immediately started scanning through Dad's emails. Nothing recent, but one from 6 months ago caught my eye. Subject line, for safekeeping. It had a file link, but it had been deleted. Dead link, and it had been opened 3 days after Dad died. Guess who'd logged into his email that day? Linda. I'd seen her using his old tablet at the house when I stopped by to get my things. She said she was sorting contacts. Right? That's when I remembered something. In my studio closet, I had an old hard drive, one of Dad's. He used to send me backups just in case Google turns into Skynet, he'd joke. I dug it out, wiped the dust, and plugged it in. Folder after folder of audio projects, song drafts, and home recordings. I scrolled until my wrist cramped, and then I saw it. Plan B. WAV. It was a voice memo, just over a minute long. I clicked. My dad's voice, crackly but clear, filled the room. If you're hearing this, it means things went sideways. And knowing my sister the tracks. This is my voice. Daniel, you'll know how to use this. This message verifies that the last will I sign digitally was uploaded to the server on April 3rd. Passcode's the date of your first solo gig. You've got the only access code. You know where I hid the backup? If they try anything, son, press play. I sat back cold, creeping up my arms like static. He knew. He saw them coming. And now he was handing me the gun. I spent the rest of the night scrubbing the audio. I enhanced the waveform, isolated background, hiss cleaned up the speech artifacts, made it court clean. Every breath, every vowel sounded like truth. The house was silent except for my monitors, and I remember thinking, if anyone broke in right now, they'd find me alone, talking to a dead man surrounded by glowing waveforms like digital ghosts. I didn't sleep. I started building a plan instead. Because now I had a voice and a reason to make them listen. I didn't tell anyone about the recording. Not yet. There's something delicious about holding a secret that could burn down a room. It sits on your tongue like a spicy aftertaste, flickering behind every word you say. I went about my week pretending I wasn't clutching a digital grenade in my pocket. I played it cool. Sent polite thank you texts to relatives. I even answered Claire's call when she rang 3 days later, though the way she said, "Hey, cousin," made me want to peel my own eardrums off. She asked if I was doing okay, asked if I needed anything. Then asked, "So did Dad say anything weird to you before he passed?" Weird. Not sentimental. Not meaningful. Weird. Like she was trying to cross off a list. I answered with a vague hum and said something about Dad talking a lot about garden tools. It was nonsense. But she laughed nervously and changed the subject. I could almost hear her filing that under no further questions. After I hung up, I clipped a mic to my lamp and started talking to myself. Testing tones. Frequencies how I'd process the audio. Not for the recording I already had, but for one I didn't. Not yet. Ooh. You ever been to a family dinner where every smile feels like a concealed weapon? Linda invited everyone to celebrate his memory with lasagna and rosé in her Pinterest-perfect dining room. I knew what it really was, a power move. Get everyone in one room, make them feel full drowsy and compliant. The first thing dictators do is feed you, then gaslight you into thinking they're nice. I wore a gray button-up and brought tiramisu. Inside my jacket, taped along the seam, was my lavalier mic. I'd rigged it to record directly into a pocket recorder hidden inside a hard sunglasses case. Always look like you're just worried about UV rays. I kept my distance at first, nursing a drink, watching my cousins orbit the cheese plate like synchronized liars. Nathan was braying on about crypto. Claire was pretending she didn't know I existed. And Aunt Linda had morphed into a wine-sipping Martha Stewart, all cold pearls and warm manipulation. But then Linda started talking. "I just think Daniel's been through a lot," she said casually, loud enough for everyone to hear. "And sometimes grief makes people imagine things, you know. Imagine, not remember, not feel. Imagine." My fingers itched to press pause on the whole evening. Later, when the rosé had made its third lap around the table, Linda pulled me aside. "Danny, sweetheart." She cooed her breath like fermented peaches. "I know you're smart. Really, I do. But maybe it's best if we just move on. Dad wanted peace. Dad hated peace. He once got banned from a local HOA meeting for starting a protest over mailbox colors. I am moving on," I replied, keeping my voice low. "I just think it's strange. The will, I mean." Her eyes tightened just a fraction. "What's strange about it?" I shrugged. "No mention of the house, or me, or the microphones." She blinked. "He changed his mind, sweetheart. People change their minds all the time." I nodded. "Guess it's lucky you had that new version printed so fast." She froze for a microsecond, then smiled. "Well, we had a feeling it might be needed. That was all I needed." The mic was catching every word. Crisp, clear. Better than anything I could have hoped for. Back in my apartment, I synced the audio to my editing suite and scrubbed it until it shone like glass. I labeled it ambient family noise, WAV, which was both technically true and satisfying as hell. I sent a duplicate to a locked backup cloud. Labeled that one Unicorn Fart Mix 3. WAV. No one ever checks that folder. And then, for good measure, I played Dad's voice again. Just once, just to remind myself why I was doing this. If they try anything, son, press play. That night I had a dream. I was in my studio, except the walls were covered in ivy. And my father's voice came from every direction, like surround sound grief. In the dream, he said, "They'll hear it eventually. Make sure they can't turn the volume down." I woke up before sunrise and scribbled that on a sticky note, pasted it on my desk, next to the recorder. 3 days later, I got a message. A calendar invite, no subject line. Just Cole family, estate meeting, 11 a.m. Thursday, Fletcher and Penn Law Group. The firm, Dad's lawyers, at least they were. The invite came from Linda's assistant, which was weird because Linda isn't a lawyer. But I said yes, because I had a mic, and I was about to bring it to the best sound check of my life. Thursday came with the humidity of an unspoken threat, the kind of air that sits on your shoulders waiting for someone to flinch. I dressed down simple jean sneakers and a plain black t-shirt. Nothing that said prepared for battle, even though I was wired like a surveillance van on legs. The law office was on the 6th floor of a glass-paneled building that smelled like money and lemon cleaner. I arrived 10 minutes early. Linda's assistant Justine offered me flat water and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her clipboard looked like it could double as a weapon. The conference room was cold, a rectangular table in a sea of beige with a view of the city that screamed, We win lawsuits here. I sat at the far end, close to the outlet part, habit part, paranoia. They trickled in slowly. Nathan first wearing a blazer too tight for his arms. Claire in muted pastels and Botox-level detachment. Then Linda trailing perfume and control. She greeted me like I'd wandered in from the wrong floor. "I didn't expect you to come," she said. "Yeah, most surprises are better that way." She smiled like she'd just stepped on a cat. Fletcher, the lawyer who'd been handling Dad's estate, was nowhere to be found. Instead, a junior partner. Miles something led the meeting. Hair too perfect. Sweet too, Matt. He had the presence of a substitute teacher who knew the class was smarter than him. "We're here to formalize the reading of Mr. Cole's will, and to confirm the current directives," he said, sliding papers across the table. "As per the version signed on May 17th. My skin prickled. May 17th. That was the day after Dad's last ER visit. "You have that version on record?" I asked, keeping my tone curious. Yes, the hard copy was delivered by Mrs. Linda Reed and corroborated by her witness statement, he said, nodding toward her. Linda dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a tissue she hadn't used. I raised a finger. "Can I ask, was there a video recording of the signing?" Miles blinked. No, just the signature page. So no voice verification, no second authentication." He frowned. "Well, that's not strictly necessary." I leaned back, letting the silence stretch. "Got it. Just wondering." And then Aunt Linda said the sentence that would end her whole performance. "Well, Daniel," she purred, "if your father wanted you involved, don't you think he would have told someone besides you?" I tilted my head. "Maybe he did," Nathan scoffed. "Like who? Your imaginary therapist?" I smiled. "Nope. Himself." Their faces froze mid-expression. And somewhere inside my jacket, the mic picked it all up. That's when I knew I had them. Their confidence cracked just a bit, like glass under slow pressure. No one asked what I meant, because they were afraid they already knew. Miles cleared his throat and shuffled some papers like they'd started to grow teeth. We spent the next hour skimming legalese and barely concealed power plays. I kept quiet, my pocket recorder still ticking away. I wanted every sigh, every shuffle, every forced laugh. When the meeting ended, Linda touched my shoulder, lightly, like a butterfly made of spite. "You're not going to make this harder than it needs to be, are you?" I looked her dead in the eye. "I don't have to make it hard." "You already did." She blinked just once, but I swear it echoed. Later that night, I sat in my studio with all the windows shut. The lights dimmed low, just the LED ring from my monitors humming like a halo. I synced the day's audio, filtered out the room tone, and isolated Linda's little masterpiece of a sentence. "If your father wanted you involved." I played it again. Then I layered it with her voice from the dinner, where she said, "Dad changed his mind. People always do." The inconsistencies were tiny, but they were there, and I had timestamps to prove it. I didn't stop there. I pulled out the old files from Dad's encrypted folder, the one he mentioned in Plan B. Wave, the passcode. October 19, 2020. My first solo gig at that weird rooftop bar that made all their cocktails with rosemary smoke. Inside was a PDF, digitally signed, time-stamped, clean metadata. The real will. My name. The house. The gear. Everything he said I'd have. Dad even included a personal note in the document footer. "You always listen better than the rest. Trust that instinct." I ran my hand over the keyboard. For the first time since he died, I felt something solid inside me, like a spine growing back. I printed a clean copy, saved 3 backups. Then I opened my audio editor and began building the ultimate mix. 1 track. Dad's voice. 1 track. Linda contradicting herself. 1 track. The real will, layered like a podcast from hell. I named the session Herden Court Final Mix. Umwaft, because that's where it was going. And I was going to press play. You ever feel a moment getting heavy before it happens? Like the air thickens just enough to let you know. "Hey, bud, this one's gonna matter." That was me Monday morning, 10 minutes before I met Aunt Linda for coffee. She'd texted like it was a truce. Just us, one-on-one. Let's talk before things get messy. Messy, like I'd spilled paint on her precious little plane. I picked a spot near the courthouse neutral territory, good lighting public enough that she couldn't scream. She wore her usual armor. Pastel blazer, oversized sunglasses, and that perfume that smells like expensive gum. I wore earbuds. Not because I was listening to music, but because I was feeding the input directly into my pocket recorder. Noise canceling. No, noise capturing. Oh, absolutely. She smiled like she was about to sell me something she'd stolen from my own pocket. Danny, she began setting her phone face down. We're both tired. Your father's gone. That's hard. But dragging this out, it's just going to hurt everyone. Dragging this out sounds a lot like asking questions. I said calmly, stirring my coffee. Is that the part that's bothering you? She didn't blink. Linda doesn't blink when she lies. That's how you know it's bad. She holds your gaze like she's daring you to call her bluff. I just think if you knew what your father wanted, really wanted, you wouldn't be putting yourself through this. She reached into her bag and slid something across the table. A check. 50, like Yakbanlardes. Taxed, pre-signed, dated for today. You can use this. Fix your little studio. Take a trip. Start over. There it was. The bribe. Flat and pale against the wood. Generous, I said, sipping my coffee. But let me ask something. If you were so sure of what Dad wanted, why not let me hear it in his voice? She tilted her head. He didn't leave anything like that. I smiled. My best poker face, the one I use when I'm debugging corrupted files. Funny, because I think he did. I didn't tell her about the mix, or the backup, or that I'd already set a legal meeting for Friday. Let her stew in that little mystery. She stood up, left the check on the table, and walked out, like someone who thought the story was still hers. I took the check because I had plans for that paper. Spoiler, it was going to be Exhibit B. The rest of the week was a blur of legal prep. I met with Dad's old assistant, a quiet guy named Ray, who looked like an accountant, but talked like an FBI informant. Yeah, your dad mentioned some concerns, he said, flipping through old emails. He sent me a backup of that will too, just in case. Still got it. Ray nodded and grinned. 2 USB sticks, one in my desk, one inside a hollowed-out Bob Ross mug. I liked Ray immediately. We printed everything. Email timestamps, file hashes, metadata logs, witness lists. I added my audio files layered and dated with transcripts. Labeled the recordings like studio tracks. Track 1, Dad. Will confirmation. Track 2, Linda. Contradiction dinner. Wav. Track 3, meeting room. Statement. Wav. Track 4, coffee bribe offer. Wabi. Each one clean-edited, subtitled. By Thursday night, I had a manila folder thick with receipts and a thumb drive labeled Revenge Master. And because I'm petty, I made a duplicate called Linda Sucks V2 Final. Warv. Then I called Miles, the junior lawyer from the estate meeting. I have evidence of will tampering audio confirmation from the deceased and a digital trail, I said calmly. I'm filing Friday morning, and I'll be requesting a hearing. Silence. Then, understood. We'll confirm with the probate judge. You're bringing recordings? Yep. 4 of them. You're aware courtrooms aren't fond of surprises, mister. Cole, don't worry. I'll bring headphones. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the studio with every monitor on screens glowing like I was being interrogated by my own ghosts. I pulled up the final track at the one I hadn't shared with anyone. Dad's voice again from a voicemail dated 3 days before he died. I know what they're planning, he said softly. If they win, you walk away. But if you can prove it, don't hold back. Let them hear everything. That was my green light. Friday morning came sharp and cold. As I walked toward the courthouse manila folder tucked under my arm, I could feel it. That air pressure shift before thunder. Linda was already there, flanked by Claire and Nathan. Claire wore pearls, like she was going to a wedding. Nathan was chewing gum like it owed him money. I didn't smile, just walked past them. Because I had Dad in my pocket, and in about 20 minutes, the whole courtroom was going to hear him speak. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not metaphorically, it actually felt like someone had left the AC on Arctic suffering overnight. My palms were sweating anyway. Cold rooms warm nerves. Linda, Claire, and Nathan sat on the left side of the gallery like a bored jury of snakes. Their lawyer looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I took my seat with Ray behind me, his Bob Ross mug secured in a padded case like it was the Holy Grail. The probate judge, a small man with tired eyes and a voice like gravel in a blender, called us to order. He asked for opening remarks. Linda's lawyer, a trim guy in a navy suit who probably practices smiling in the mirror, stood first. Your Honor, this is a straightforward case. The deceased's will signed, dated, witnessed, clearly outlines his intentions. My client, Mims. Reed ensured this process was handled efficiently and respectfully. He sat. My turn. I stood slowly, clutching my folder like a favorite record sleeve. Your Honor, I began there, is nothing respectful about deception. I intend to prove that the will presented was not the final nor the intended document by my father. What I bring today is not conjecture, it's his voice. The judge raised a brow. You mean testimony? I mean literal voice. From a recorded statement made before his passing, along with corroborating evidence from multiple sources. A pause. Proceed. I walked to the table, plugged my small speaker into the USB drive, labeled Revenge Master, and hit play. Dad's voice filled the courtroom. If you're hearing this, it means things went sideways. And knowing my sister, that tracks. Gasps. One quiet curse. Claire stiffened like someone had poured glitter in her pantsuit. The judge leaned forward. Dad continued. This message verifies that the last will I signed digitally was uploaded to the server on April 3rd. Passcode's the date of Daniel's first solo gig. You've got the only access code. You know where I hid the backup. If they try anything, press play. I pressed pause. Your Honor, the digital will has been recovered and verified. Time-stamped. No edits. No missing sections. Backed up in 2 locations. Witnessed by Mr. Raymond Lowe, who is here today. Ray gave a nervous little wave. The judge looked at Linda's lawyer. Response. The man stood like a pulled puppet. The audio may not constitute legal authority. We don't have verification of its authenticity. I smiled. I'm an audio engineer. I've brought waveform analyses, metadata logs, and source comparisons. We can verify the voice if necessary, but it's already matched against 4 known samples. The judge nodded. Continue. Next track. Linda. Contradiction dinner. Wav. Her voice over the clink of wine glasses. He changed his mind, sweetheart. People change their minds all the time. I crossfaded to the clip from the coffee shop. Her voice again. He didn't leave anything like that. Back and forth. Same tone, different lies. Then the kicker, the bribe. Her voice. You can use this. Fix your little studio. Take a trip. Start over. Gasps again. Claire put her hand over her mouth. Nathan suddenly became very interested in his shoes. I turned to the judge. If I may, I also have a PDF copy of the original will, digitally signed with metadata, showing no alterations since upload. The judge gestured. Submit it. I handed over the folder. Paper smooth. Facts sharp. Final exhibit, Your Honor. A corroborating USB backup from Mr. Lowe. Same will. Same timestamp. Delivered before any contest. Ray brought the mug forward and pulled the drive out like it was a sacred relic. Linda finally stood. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were pure panic dressed in pearls. This is a stunt. Daniel was always dramatic. His father had medical episodes. He could have been confused. We don't know when those recordings were made. She looked to the judge, trying to summon some invisible sympathy. The judge exhaled, long, like he'd seen too many of these already. Miss Reed, were you aware of any recordings made by the deceased? She hesitated. No, I know. But you assured your nephew that nothing like this existed, correct? Her mouth opened. Closed. Yes, she said softly. The judge nodded. And yet here they are. The gavel didn't slam that day. This wasn't TV, but the message was clear. The judge ordered a temporary hold on all estate activity pending final review of the audio evidence, and instructed a forensic tech team to examine both the drives and Linda's submitted documents. He looked at me before adjourning. Mr. Cole, you've brought something rare. Not just evidence, but clarity. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice not to crack. Outside the courthouse, Linda stormed past me like I was a pothole. You smug little bastard, she hissed. I tilted my head. You left out the brilliant part. Claire wouldn't look at me. Nathan muttered something about lawyers and stalked off. Ray clapped me on the back. You really pressed play, huh? Yeah, I said, pulling out the USB and tossing it into my palm like a coin. And I'm not done yet. Because this wasn't just about a will. It was about the last time anyone underestimated me. They say revenge is best served cold. That's true. But they don't tell you how satisfying it is when it's also served loud and through crystal clear speakers in a federal building. After court, I thought there might be some kind of silence. A pause. But there wasn't. The next 48 hours were just a long, unskippable montage of fallout. It started with the email from Miles. Subject line, rare, update on probate review. Immediate action required. I clicked it open, barely chewing the leftover sandwich I was pretending was lunch. The forensic team had already flagged inconsistencies in the version of the will submitted by Linda's camp. The file metadata showed edits 2 days after Dad's death. Someone had backdated the document. Sloppily. I almost wanted to call their tech guy and critique his timestamp masking. Almost. But I didn't have to. The court had already filed a motion. Linda's will submission was now under fraud investigation. Next came the phone call from Nathan. I didn't recognize the number, but the area code was familiar. So I picked up while adjusting mic levels for a podcast I was mixing. Danny, hey, it's Nate. His voice had that thick desperation, like he'd just realized his yacht was inflatable. I just wanted to say, I didn't know what Linda was doing, man. She told us everything was by the book, I swear. I leaned back in my chair, flipping a knob on instinct. Sure, Nate. Just like you didn't know that bribes aren't condolences. I didn't sign anything. I mean, I did, but she said it was just paperwork. Of course she did. I'll testify, he said quickly. If you need me to, I'll tell them I heard her talking about rewriting things. Just don't let this blow back on me. He sounded like a kid caught cheating on an open book test. I'll think about it, I said and hung up. I didn't need him, but I wanted to hear him squirm. Then Claire called, or rather, she left a voice note, which bless her she sent while clearly under the influence of boxed Chardonnay. It's not like you were going to do anything with the house anyway, she slurred. You live in that little cave, and your job's like weird, no offense. But you don't need stuff like we do. She actually said stuff. I saved the audio, labeled it, Claire tone deaf. Wuff, because someday you might want a bonus track. Meanwhile, I met with the court tech liaison, a sharp woman named Janine who reminded me of a human firewall. You have the original files? She asked. 3 copies. She grinned. Good. I'd like to use them in the fraud briefing. I handed her the USB labeled Exhibit A. Kept the other 2 in my desk in my sock drawer. The sock drawer one has a sticker on it that says, "Do not eat." Pickled eggs. Works every time. On Thursday, I received a letter from the court. Judge-approved preliminary reinstatement of the digital will as the last valid testament. Further proceedings would finalize the estate, but the house, the gear, the real inheritance, back in my name. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat in my studio chair, turned in slow circles, and stared at the monitor where Dad's waveform still glowed. I whispered, "We did it, old man." And then I pressed play just one more time for the hell of it. That night, I packed a box. Just one. Took the bus to Dad's place. The house, my house now. It still smelled like him. A mix of pine cleaner and engine oil and cinnamon gum. The porch light buzzed softly when I turned it on. I let myself in, walked to the studio room. He never quite finished, and opened the closet where he kept the good mic, his first condenser. Still wrapped in a flannel rag, I whispered. I brought your gear home, because I needed him to hear that. Somewhere. And maybe, just maybe, he did. Later, I got a message from Ray. He'd been offered a promotion. Said he was thinking about quitting law altogether. Being around your family, he wrote, makes me want to become a lighthouse keeper. I told him that was fair. Also told him he could crash at my place if he ever needed to disappear for a bit. The best part, I didn't rub it in. Didn't post screenshots. Didn't send emails. Didn't even reply when Claire's third voice note included the words, "So unfair." And Dad would have wanted us to be together. And I miss the cinnamon rolls he made. Of course she did. She never learned how to make them, but I did. And I was planning to bake a batch next weekend. For me, for Dad, for the silence that finally made sense. I spent the weekend alone in the house. No calls, no emails, no fake apologies. Just me, the creak of the old floorboards, and a cinnamon roll recipe written in my dad's jagged handwriting on the back of a faded invoice for guitar strings. It felt like being inside someone's memory. Every drawer I opened had a story. Every closet had something weird tucked behind the useful stuff. A half-used roll of gaffer tape in the linen cupboard. 3 unopened tins of chili labeled emergency only. 1 sock that matched a pair I still owned, which made me irrationally emotional for no reason. I slept on the couch that night, not because I had to, but because that was his couch. I think I wanted to feel something closer to him. Like maybe I could soak up the last bit of his presence through the fabric. And at around 3 a.m., when the fridge kicked on and scared the hell out of me, I laughed. Because Dad used to call that his night security system. Scares burglars, keeps snacks cool. Same line every time. By Monday, the dust had mostly settled. The court emailed a summary ruling. The digital will was officially validated. The fraudulent submission had been dismissed pending further investigation, which is a nice way of saying, Linda, you messed around, and now you're about to find out. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of too strong coffee and reread the document 3 times. It was boring, unemotional, the kind of language that can suck the joy out of a birthday card. But buried in the middle like a hidden chorus was my name next to the house. The studio, the microphones, the sailboat we never finished. Every time I saw it, I heard Dad's voice. It's not much, but it's yours. He was right. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Later that day, I got a call. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. Hello? A long pause. Then, Mr. Cole, this is Detective Kim County Financial Crimes Unit. I blinked. Okay. We've opened a formal case related to the fraudulent will submission. Your recordings have been entered as primary evidence. We may ask you to testify if charges are brought forward. I sat very still. You're saying it's official? Yes, sir. Miss Reed is currently under investigation, and her legal representation has been notified. I looked out the window. The neighbor's dog was chasing a bird shadow like it owed him money. Thank you, I said. Just doing our job. But if I may, Mr. Cole, good work? Most people wouldn't have caught what you did. I smiled. Yeah. Well, listening's my job. The following weekend, I baked the cinnamon rolls. It wasn't a symbolic gesture. I just really wanted one. The kitchen filled with the kind of smell that feels like an apology you didn't know you needed. Sugar and butter and something warm and old and good. I brought 2 to the porch. A little ritual, mine and Dad's. And while I sat out there sipping coffee, I saw something unexpected. Linda, she stood at the end of the driveway, arms crossed, sunglasses on, even though the sky was gray. No lawyer, no backup, just her. I didn't get up. She walked halfway, then stopped. I just wanted to see it, she said. Before they take everything. I tilted my head. They're not taking anything. You gave it away the second you forged his name. She flinched. I held out the second cinnamon roll. She didn't move. Suit yourself, I said, and took a bite. When she finally turned and walked away, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel angry. I just felt quiet. Like someone had closed a door gently behind me. And for the first time in months, I didn't hear the echo. Just the birds and the soft crunch of cinnamon sugar. I guess I thought it would feel more final. Like I'd win, they'd lose, and a curtain would fall. Some dramatic score would play. And I'd ride off into the silence like a smug cowboy with a USB stick in his back pocket. But real life doesn't work like that. Real life just continues, quietly, persistently. The fridge hums. The mail shows up. The neighbor still lets her kid ride a bike way too fast down the sidewalk. It's honestly kind of beautiful. But yeah, I still had some cleanup to do. See, the court had ruled. The estate was settled. Linda's fraud was being processed through the polite gears of bureaucracy. But there was one last track I hadn't remastered yet. The sailboat? Dad called it the evening fix. He bought it the year after Mom left. Said it kept him sane, or at least busy. It sat in the driveway under a tarp that smelled like sun-bleached regret, and it had exactly one voyage halfway across a man-made lake before the rudder snapped, and Dad said, "Okay, Good test run. He never fixed it, but he never sold it either. So one morning I wheeled the tarp off and stood there looking at the chipped hull and faded name like it was an artifact. I ran my hand along the edge and found a note, yes, a literal note taped underneath. Because of course he'd leave me one last Easter egg. It read, "Still needs a rudder. Thought maybe you'd finish what I couldn't. You always were better at following through." Underneath the note, a flash drive. You can't make this up. I ran back inside, plugged it in, and waited. There were 3 files. Sale manual, PDF, which was exactly what it sounded like. Evening fix budget, XLSX, a spreadsheet of parts costs and sarcastic notes. One cell literally read, "This bolt costs what? Final track, WAV." My heart did that thing where it stutters a little like a skipped beat on vinyl. I clicked play. Dad's voice came through warmer this time, like he was sitting next to me, mic in hand, drink nearby. "Hey kid, if you're listening, you probably found the boat. I figured you would. You always had a better sense of where things were going than I did." I smiled. My throat tightened. I left a few notes. "Don't rush it. The whole point of fixing something is giving yourself time to feel it come back to life." Same with people, I think. He laughed soft, tired. "I didn't always get it right. You know that, but I never doubted you'd find a way to set things straight. You don't talk much, Danny, but you listen. That's your superpower." There was a pause. Then, "And hey, when it's done, take it out once. Just once. Doesn't need to be far. Just enough to say you finished what I started." Click. Silence. I sat there with my hand over my mouth, the cursor blinking like it was waiting for me to say something. I didn't. There wasn't anything to add. I spent the next week ordering parts. I watched hours of YouTube tutorials with guys named Chuck and Sal explaining rudder ratios and epoxy cures. I smelled like fiberglass and soap for 3 days. I accidentally glued my glove to a wrench. Twice, and every night I played Dad's final track before I shut down the shop lights. It became my ritual, a strange little duet between past and present. The day it was ready, I loaded the boat onto a borrowed trailer, hitched it to Ray's truck, he didn't ask questions, and drove out to the same man-made lake. It was gray quiet and slightly choppy. Perfect. I launched the evening fix at 8. I wore his old windbreaker. I packed 2 cinnamon rolls. And I played that final track over a small speaker as I floated out just far enough. Not to escape, just to finish. I stayed out on the water longer than I planed. Not far, just longer. There's something disorienting about floating with nothing but soft waves slapping against fiberglass and a dead man's voice lingering in the air. I let the wind nudge the boat like it was guiding me somewhere I didn't have to name. No engine, no sails. Just a completed rudder and the momentum of closure. I let myself drift. I didn't cry. It's not really my style. But I did laugh once when I remembered how Dad used to claim he was descended from pirates, even though the most dangerous thing in our family tree was a guy who once got banned from bingo for yelling fraud. Too early. I bit into a cinnamon roll and let crumbs fall onto the deck. Offerings. For memory. For the waves. When I got home, the silence felt different. Not heavy. Not lonely. Just quiet. A kind of quiet you earn. I went into the studio and sat in the chair that still smelled faintly like him pine dust and the leftover musk of focus. I opened a new session in my audio software and titled it Fix Track Unum, WAV. And then, for the first time in a long time, I recorded something for me. Not for court, not for evidence, not for revenge, just for the sound of it. I layered field recordings from the lake, the rudder creak, wind through nylon, my own footsteps over gravel. Then I added Dad's voice, just one line from the final track. Don't rush it. I cut it. Resampled it, let it echo. It sounded like peace. I could have stopped there. But no, something in me wanted closure with a cherry on top. So I paid one last visit to Linda. She was still in the house she'd bribed her way into briefly before the court forced her out of estate business entirely. Now she was just another soon-to-be defendant waiting for the hammer to drop. I didn't go inside. I left a padded envelope at her door, labeled Play Me. Inside was a USB. Only one file. Linda final. Or B. It was her voice auto-tuned and sliced over a beat I made from the clink of rosé glasses and her own nervous laughter. I added a chorus. If Dad wanted you to win, he'd have left you more than gin. Petty. Yes. Satisfying. Deeply. Nathan texted me a day later. Bro, did you remix Aunt Linda? I didn't reply, but I saw he'd shared the track on Reddit. Went mildly viral under the tag Legal Bops. I figured Dad would have approved. The man once made a ringtone out of a dial-up modem and used it for 5 years. I moved back into the house full-time by mid-June. Cleaned the place top to bottom. Every cobweb, every loose nail. I found an old photo of us behind the water heater. Dad had taped it up with gaffer tape and a note that read, "You look so serious, I had to frame it somewhere stupid." I kept it there, because that's exactly where it belongs. The studio's different now. Not louder, not softer, just mine. And every now and then, when I lean back in the chair and let the monitors glow, I hear Dad's laugh in the back of my memory. And I think, I pressed play, and I didn't stop until they heard it all. You'd think a story like this ends when the bad guys lose and the good guy wins a house and a sailboat with emotional significance. Roll credits fade out, but real life doesn't really do fade-outs. It just keeps humming like a power strip behind a desk. 2 weeks after the final ruling, I got a letter, an actual letter, like with a stamp and everything. It was from the firm Fletcher & Penn. And the envelope had that thin law office paper texture that makes everything inside it feel 10% more threatening. I opened it with the same energy you'd use to defuse a very polite bomb. Inside was a note from Fletcher himself. Apparently, he'd been on sabbatical and only recently returned. He apologized for the confusion and expressed deep regret that his absence had allowed irregularities to go unnoticed. I read between the lines. Linda had taken full advantage of a distracted office. He enclosed something unexpected, a check. Not from the estate, from him, for your diligence and clarity. And as a gesture of apology, $10,000. I stared at it like it might sprout legs and run away. Ray told me to frame it. I told Ray I was buying a new soundproofing rig. We compromised. I taped a photocopy of the check to the back of a new bass trap in the studio. Justice and acoustics. Both important. Meanwhile, Linda's case was picking up speed. Detective Kim called to update me. They're pursuing criminal charges. Forgery, attempted fraud, possibly obstruction. She asked if I'd be willing to testify. I already have, I said. 4 times. In what format? She chuckled. Right. Well, if we need you in person, I'll let you know. Then more quietly, I hope you understand you've done something rare. Most people wouldn't have known where to look. I did know where to look, because I'd been listening since the beginning. And the thing about listening is, it doesn't just let you hear others, it lets you hear yourself. Later that week, I found a new tenant for Dad's sailboat, not a buyer. A tenant. Her name was Maria. She ran a little watercraft class on the lake. She wanted to use the evening fix to teach her teen students how to handle single sail vessels. I handed her the keys and said, treat her like she's stubborn, but trying her best. She smiled. Aren't we all? One night, I visited Dad's grave. I hadn't been back since the funeral. I brought a portable speaker, a cinnamon roll, and a folding chair. Sat beside the stone and hit play on the final track. His voice soft and clear. Don't rush it. I stayed until the stars came out. Didn't talk, didn't cry, just listened. When I got home, I found something on the porch. A package. No note. Inside. A vintage condenser microphone. Polished. Beautiful. No tag, but I knew where it came from. Linda's husband had once told me he could never look at that mic again. I guess now he didn't have to. I mounted it in the studio that night. Called it The Last Word. I started a new project after that. A podcast. Not like anything I'd done before. Each episode tells a real story with sound at the center. Sometimes it's crime. Sometimes it's love. Sometimes it's revenge that tastes like cinnamon and static. The first episode. Press play. How My Father Outsmarted His Family from the Grave. Linda's remix plays during the credits. By the 3rd episode of the podcast, I had 200 subscribers. Small potatoes by internet standards, but for a guy whose last attempt at content creation was a lo-fi beat tape titled Laundry Sounds Vol. 2, it felt like selling out Madison Square Garden. I started getting emails. People who wanted me to tell their stories. Some were simple neighbors fighting over trees, families feuding over basements, but a few were eerily close to mine. One woman sent a Dropbox link full of voicemail recordings between her and her stepmother, full of fake apologies and implied threats. Another guy had a tape from 1997 of his dad admitting he changed the locks on a house before the sale went through. Turns out families are just messy reality shows waiting for a sound guy. So I became that sound guy. Quietly, steadily. I didn't become famous, but I became useful. Oh. One afternoon, I was mixing down episode 5 about a guy who forged his uncle's signature on a property sale in Nevada Classic, when I got an email that froze me. Subject: listener question. Your dad's track. It was from a woman named Jess. Said she loved the show, had listened to Press Play 3 times, and had a very specific question. Is your dad's voice layered under the intro music? There's a low frequency pattern that sounds like a vocal sample. Something like, finish what I started. Is that real? I nearly dropped my coffee. Because yes, it was real. I'd taken a 2-second clip from Dad's last recording, pitched it down, filtered it into the sub-bass, and buried it under a soft vinyl crackle. It wasn't meant to be heard consciously, but someone heard it. I replied, only you caught it. You win. She wrote back, I listen for a living too. I sat with that for a while. That idea that people like us aren't loud, but we're there, always picking up the frequencies everyone else skips. By now, the Evening Fix had been featured in 2 community newsletters and one weird blog called Lake Legends. Maria's students loved it. One of them, this lanky, awkward genius named Will, started calling it the Ghost Boat because of the speaker I left, mounted inside. It only played one thing on loop, Dad's voice low and subtle. Don't rush it. I was back at the studio late one night when I heard something strange. Not strange like ghosts. Strange like recognition. A phrase from an old voicemail. It was Claire. Back when we were both 15, fighting over something dumb. She said, you don't fight fair, Danny. You just wait and wait until you win. I'd saved it by accident. And she was right. I didn't fight fair. I waited. I listened. I let them write their own story. And then I played it back with better sound design. I cut a new intro for the next podcast episode. Used that old line of Claire's as the cold open. Overlaid it with tape hiss and a deep analog chord progression. The title, Waiting to Win, a quiet strategy. People loved it. Even got a DM from someone at a media company. They said, we love your tone. Any interest in doing a series about audio as evidence? I wrote back, only if I get to press record. Sometimes I dream about the courtroom, but not the scary parts. The moment I press play, the hush, the moment their faces changed. It's funny what one voice perfectly placed can do to a room. You don't have to yell to win. You just have to let them hear what they're too scared to say out loud. Things were good. Not perfect perfection's a marketing slogan, but good in the way where I could eat a sandwich without checking my phone for a court date. The podcast was doing well. I was booked 2 months out with stories. Half of them came with pre-synced audio files, and the other half were people whispering, you didn't hear this from me, but I'd become a one-man confessional booth, except my rosary was a waveform, and my incense was coffee and foam panels. I liked it. I'd finally found a way to take the skill that had always made me feel a little invisible listening and make it louder. But then something weird happened. I got a letter, another one, same paper as before, same neat lawyer-type envelope. This time, it was from a law office in a different state, Arizona. Inside, a handwritten note. Mr. Cole, your father's digital signature appears on a shared copyright agreement filed 7 years ago in relation to a music licensing service. You are listed as co-owner. Please contact us. I blinked. Then I blinked again. 7 years ago, Dad and I had co-written a few tracks, goofy little audio experiments we'd upload to free use sites. He'd call them junk loops for future geniuses. Apparently, one of those loops had ended up in a major commercial. Like, big, national campaign, automotive brand, 6 figures in licensing fees. They'd been sitting in escrow, tied up in some dispute until the paperwork was cleared, which happened now. I checked the track. It was a 14-second lo-fi loop built out of washing machine clunks and a beat Dad hummed while fixing the sink. I cried, openly, loudly, and then I laughed so hard I choked on a sip of ginger ale. Dad had left me one more gift, tucked into a trash folder labeled test. I wired the money into 2 accounts. One was for the house. The other, I used it to fund something Dad always joked about. A community studio. Small space, cheap rent, good insulation. I called it The Fix. A place for quiet people to get loud. Ray came by during the opening. He brought a plant that looked like it was already planning its own death. I named it Linda, he said, setting it on a windowsill. Just in case you need motivation. We laughed. I didn't tell him I'd already renamed the bathroom speaker system Nathan because it only worked when it wanted to. That first week we had 6 clients. By the 3rd week we had 22 podcasters, musicians, one guy who just wanted to record himself reading novels to send to his mom. People don't always want fame. They want to be heard. So, one night, after everyone had cleared out, I sat in the darkened control room, just letting the silence settle around me. I played Dad's final message one last time. If they try anything, son, press play. I whispered back I did. Then I muted the track, saved the project, and titled the session, Everything I Needed, Wave. Before I left, I scribbled a quote on the whiteboard in the lobby. The loudest people aren't always right, but the ones who listen usually are. And under it, in smaller print, Dad, even though he never said it, but he would have loved it. Summer slid into fall with that soft kind of tempo shift, the kind you don't notice, until your breath fogs the window while you're waiting for your tea to steep. Leaves fell. The neighborhood turned orange and gold. And inside the studio, my inbox stayed full. I started letting people come in just to talk. No mics, no edits. Just soundproof walls and someone willing to listen. Turns out, when you remove the pressure to perform, people say the most remarkable things. One woman told me she found a cassette in her grandfather's attic labeled, Don't Be Sad. It was just 20 minutes of him reading from the TV guide and laughing at his own mispronunciations. We digitized it. She cried. We cried. A teenager came in to record a spoken word poem about her mom's perfumes. It smelled like rain and loss, she said. I added a soft vinyl crackle underneath. She whispered, That sounds like her. The Fix became less a business and more a refuge, a place where people's voices could take their time. I still ran the podcast, still got submissions, but I was pickier now. The loudest stories weren't always the best ones. Sometimes it was the guy who just wanted to record himself asking for forgiveness, one sentence at a time. Sometimes it was silence, then the click of a mic turning off. Sometimes that was the story. Claire reached out once. An email. Just a few lines. I heard the episode, the one with my voice. I don't know if I'm mad or relieved. Maybe both, but I get it now. I think I didn't want to know what Dad wanted, because I already knew, and it wasn't me. I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because silence felt like the only honest answer. The sailboat, the Evening Fix, got a new coat of paint. The kids kept up with it, added solar lights around the deck, and rigged a Bluetooth speaker under the bench. Maria sent me a photo of them out at sunset. In the background, I could almost hear a laugh I knew by heart. No. And then one day, I got a box in the mail. No return address. Inside, a cassette, unlabeled, and a single sticky note. He wanted you to have this. Said you'd know what to do. No signature. I hooked up an old tape deck and hit play. It was Dad. Of course it was Dad. He was younger, maybe mid-30s. His voice brighter, full of sarcasm and spitfire. Danny, if you're hearing this, that means I've either become wildly famous or more likely I've annoyed enough people that someone finally took me out with a golf club. Either way, I leave you this. The worst song I ever made. He strummed a guitar, sang off key. The lyrics were about a dog named Peanut and a girl named Tamara, who may or may not have been a metaphor for lasagna. It was awful. I laughed so hard I choked on my tea. Then I digitized it, added subtle harmonies, and layered in rain sounds. Uploaded it to the podcast feed as a bonus episode. Title, Tamara and Peanut. A tragedy in 3 chords. The fans loved it. Even got a comment. Is this performance art or genius? Yes. I added it to the studio playlist under legacy tracks, right between Press Play and Don't Be Sad. And then, as the last leaves blew against the studio door, I sat in my chair, adjusted the gain on my headphones, and whispered into the mic. Sometimes revenge doesn't look like fire or shouting. Sometimes it looks like a cinnamon roll and a cassette tape. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is letting them hear exactly who they really are and walking away before the echo hits. I hit record and let the silence play for 30 seconds before I began. There was one last thing I had to do. It had been sitting in the back of my mind like a final drum hit that never landed. Not urgent, not pressing, but necessary. I needed to return the house key, not my house. Her house, Linda's, well, her former house. After the court stripped her control of the estate and pending fraud charges started orbiting her like a very anxious moon, she'd moved out. Sold off a few assets. She wasn't in jail yet, but she was orbiting that possibility too. I knew she'd landed in a condo across town. I still had her spare key. She'd given it to me years ago, back when we were pretending to be a family that trusted each other. I didn't use it during all this. I never even thought to. But I found it recently in the junk drawer under Dad's old 808 batteries and a paperclip shaped like a fish. It didn't feel like a key anymore. It felt like a weight. So I decided to give it back. I didn't knock. I didn't wait. I just slipped the key into a small manila envelope, scribbled one line on the front. You don't hold the door anymore. Taped it to her door. Walked away. That was it. Closure doesn't always sound like a monologue. Sometimes it's just the click of your shoes on pavement and the feeling of nothing in your pockets. The podcast hit 10,000 subscribers the next week. Someone commented, "Your voice is like a secret I don't feel guilty keeping." I pinned it. Someone else asked if I'd ever make merch. I laughed. Because what would I even sell? Revenge-themed pop filters, signed USB drives with custom betrayal beats. Actually, okay, maybe we'll workshop that. One night, I got a late submission, an audio file titled Dad Didn't Know, WAV, from a guy who sounded maybe 18, nervous, breathless. He told the story of how his mom lied about his dad's will too. Different ending, no court, no closure, just grief and questions. He said he found my podcast by accident. Listened to Press Play. He said it felt like someone finally said the quiet part out loud. He ended the file with thanks for pressing record. I didn't air the episode. Didn't need to. Some files are for one set of ears only. I wrote him back. He might not have known, but you do. That's enough. As for me, I still work in the studio. Still fix audio for podcasters, musicians, nervous whistleblowers with bad mics and better stories. Still bake cinnamon rolls every other Sunday. Still float the evening fix out on the lake when the weather cooperates. Still play the final track now and then. Just to remind myself that the dead don't always go quiet. Sometimes they leave you a microphone and a message and a mix that changes everything. And now, I think that's all. My voice is tired. My tea is cold. But if you've made it this far, thank you for listening, for hearing, for not skipping the quiet parts. Word count, 1, 2, 3, 7. Closing summary, 300 words. If you're still here, let the sound of this final sentence stretch out a bit. Let the reverb ring, because that's how stories like this end. Not with an explosion, but with an exhale. The tale of a son, a will, a lie, and a cassette. Of silence weaponized and memory restored. Of cinnamon rolls and microphone ghosts. And above all, of a voice that never quite left, even when the man behind it did. There's something deeply satisfying about revenge that doesn't roar. Something deliciously patient about justice served through whispers, not shouts. Danny Cole didn't storm into court with fire in his hands. He just pressed play, again and again, until the truth vibrated the windows. And when it was over, he didn't gloat. He didn't burn the world down. He opened a studio, built a podcast, listened to other people who'd also been lied to, ghosted, written out. That's the real ending here, not just a win, but what came after. Using the aftermath to make room for others. So now as your screen dims and the world outside returns to full volume, remember this. You don't have to yell to make them listen. Sometimes you just need to know when to hit record and when to walk away. Good night, listener. Thanks for hearing me out.